across the United States and China, Momo is subject to multiple outstanding warrants for her arrest in connection to high-profile cybercrimes. One of her few lasting memories from before the invasion, though, were the many movie nights she had with her favorite uncle, Xiao Zhejiang, better known to XCOM as Qilong. Much to her mother's chagrin, they would often watch thrillers and high-octane action capers not exactly suitable for 5-year-olds. He would sneak her out for ice cream and other treats over the years they knew each other, fostering a defiant streak that would define her personality. Growing up without a true father figure and revealing her criminal uncle, this only worsened in her teens. She often got in trouble at school and, without exception, always defied authority. In an effort to instill some discipline and finding her an outlet for her wildness, she was put into several extracurricular programs, with computers and the internet finally drawing her attention. One of the traits that her uncle always encouraged in her was satiating her curiosity. It was simply a natural fit. As with many things in Advent's new world, this would backfire. Instead of finding discipline and structure, she found new toys with which to extend her mischievous nature. Pranks became misdemeanors. Prying became illegal breaches of privacy. And in a final attempt at correcting her daughter's behavior, her mother Dasha did not fight a juvie sentence that she was handed down. She prayed that the months in there would return an improved Momo. It would not. Lacking any semblance of accountability, she felt betrayed by her own blood and simply never came home. She was well off, though, as one of the many tricks she'd learned was how to keep her finances healthy, at the costs of others, of course. By the time she was 19, she had her own apartment on one of her home city center's high-rise towers. Life was little more than a party for her for the following years. And that was the problem. Life under Advent kept her jaded, if not oblivious, towards the realities happening outside the city walls, or even towards the lower levels within it. Her life was a movie, where the harshest consequence was a quick stint in juvie. Her crimes only got worse as a result. The thrill was certainly a part of it, but in reality, deep down, she was trying to make her uncle proud, or at least the idea of it that she had developed. And then it hit her. Uncle Xiaozhi! Enough of this unknown whereabouts bullshit, as he had vanished after the end of the invasion. It was time to put her skills to the task and find the only person that she believed could understand her. She would not find the man nor his trail, but she did find his past. Zhang being Triad really didn't come as a surprise. What did, though, was him abandoning that life to join XCOM. Records found showed that Xiaozhi was enlisted during the invasion. Advent taught her that XCOM was the enemy. Were they? Further investigation turned her life upside down. She would find records and videos of their atrocities, but breaching into highly encrypted files landed her on Advent's radar. The gunfire was real, as was the blood from a freshly received wound. On the run, Momo's only chance was to seek out XCOM, figure it out from there. Perhaps a life of reckless abandon was to become a thing of the past.
Kane was separated from his parents when his village was struck during a terror site on the nearby city of Tubigon. With nowhere else to run, he was saved by a contingent of the Filipino army, which was already quickly turning guerrilla. They flew far away from his home, to the north, Manila, where the remnants of the national government and its military attempted to regroup. There he met an XCOM veteran soldier, the leader of the Sacrificial, Kento Jai. Over the years, Kento would come to see him as his adopted son. Kento was a marksman and tried to share his knowledge. Every time he shot, though, he found them off the mark. Clear that perhaps it wasn't for him, Kento gave up on teaching him and made him learn by himself. One day, however, Kento was trying to find Kane in the hopes of the training regimen would finally struck, but he could not find the boy. Alarmed, he called his men to find his son. After several hours of searching, Kento found him on the top of a tree, hidden in its branches. Kento told Kane to come down, as he was worried about him, but after thinking for a moment, he knew that they had found Kane's strength, parkour, and exploration. Kento and the sacrificial built him an obstacle course where he could hone his skills, improving his balance, climbing, and endurance on top of the rigorous calisthenics regimen. As he grew into his own, he used these skills to help the sacrificial find more survivors, all to great effect. Now a man, Kane learned of Kento's past and what had happened to the world during the blur that was his childhood. The two finally had an understanding of one another, and it seemed they truly found a familial relationship more than master and student. With Kento now too old to carry on the fight himself, Kane was made the new leader of the sacrificial.
Standing in front of you, Central Officer Bradford, is supposed to be a shining example of the great potential humans under Advent training can achieve, as far as the Congo Basin in Africa is concerned. I was a member of the Advent division now called the Disfavored. We are supposed to be the protectors of those who live in the Congo, human or alien, no exceptions. Recruitment allowed anyone who wished to join to do so, and that means I fought alongside mutants, vipers, sectoids. Still, all of that came with a little caveat. The Disfavored strive to be the best of the best, and our leader, General King, always nurtured our talents to the best of the ability. We are iron, strong but brittle. I served for 4 years, and while the great general appreciates our loyalty, he has grown to value our independence even more, at least in secret. That is what brought me here. I started working with the resistance, and eventually I was discovered. Thus, the general took it better than I expected. You know, he raised me in a way, taught me more than what was expected of him. He took me and my father in after my mother died. I was still a little girl when that happened. While we are beneath the others' care and notice, the chosen warlock has gone to great lengths to undermine and damage our work. In the end, the general will do anything to protect his family, even his rebellious daughter. But I'll do what needs to be done. I'll make all the hard choices you ask of me. But in the end, I'll always offer mercy first to my former brothers and sisters. With that out of the way, what are my orders, sir? Riley Newport never cared to learn about the old world. She was born long after the invasion ended, and she only saw the world that Advent wanted her to. And for Riley, she was perfectly content to stay there. As the youngest child of a relatively affluent family in the U.S., she had her every want and need met. Popularity in school, too many friends to count, and even the varsity quarterback as a boyfriend. This even extended to funding her passion in photography, the one odd habit the girl had, by her own reckoning. When her parents gave Riley her first camera on her 14th birthday, though, no one, least of all her, would have expected it to lead to being declared a kidnapping victim and, eventually, a wanted terrorist. Everything started rather innocently. Riley and a group of her friends were enjoying their summer break in one of their city center's numerous parks, when a group of resistance fighters quite literally burst onto the scene. Riley ran and hid, but soon enough began taking photos of the battle, including an accidental shot of an Advent officer putting the last survivor down. And yet, the news reports about the incident claimed that the rebels had been peacefully detained for re-education. When Riley tried to go to her friends, they blindly agreed with the reports. Some even tried to convince her that she had been seen wrong. So in a fit of panic and anger, Riley sealed her fate and posted the pictures on social media. They were immediately censored, of course, and Advent was quickly sent to ask a few questions. Thankfully, though, other groups had seen her photos as well, and a resistance cell was quick to respond, pulling Riley while she was still being taken away and absconding from the city with her in tow. Officially, Riley was kidnapped, another victim of old world barbarism. And for the first week or so, Riley agreed. She did eventually calm down, but it was not an easy transition from a city life to one with the resistance. Riley quickly discovered that the world was far more complicated than Advent had claimed, and she dealt with these harsh realizations the only way she knew how: photography. She still had her camera, after all. Soon enough, she had entire binders filled with shots, both of people and the world that she had taken. She was also taught the basics of how to fight and was still slowly improving. And now that XCOM is back and taking the fight to the Elders in Advent, Riley seems eager to join up, mostly to see her family again in a free world, and to get some interesting photos out of the experience. Intelligence Officer Zhang's notes. So, her call sign Diva is a bit of an inside joke from her haven. Word is that when she first got there, she was screaming so loud and at such a high note that one of the older members of the group innocently asked if they had rescued an opera singer. They all thought it was hilarious, and the name stuck. Riley herself seems embarrassed by the name, but she hasn't submitted a request for the call sign to be changed from it.
Maisie had a very standard upbringing for a resistance child, being raised to fight for her world and potentially her entire species under rather dire circumstances. She seemed to understand that at a much earlier age than most. She preferred her own company to that of other children and adults, often playing with the limited selection of toys she had concocted wild scenarios for them. With as little as she had, it was no doubt some form of escapism even back then. This never really changed as she grew and reluctantly began her training for the militia. Without any great skill with firearms, she was relegated mostly to guard duty, a lonesome role that suited her just fine. That all led to the event that would change her, and not exactly for the better. On a night like any other, a shooting star crossed the sky. But unlike other stars, this one didn't stay up above. It crashed into the ground, a light boom echoing through the silent night. Several birds flew out of the nearby trees, and a small blast wave shook them, rattling Maisie's guard post slightly during the little lasting damage. She and her fellow militia quickly investigated, finding a small meteor nested inside its blast crater. It was roughly the size of a baby's crib, but full of holes like Swiss cheese. Although they were all somewhat cautious, they found themselves simultaneously drawn to this rather mundane-looking rock. Perhaps hoping to find something, Maisie was the first to reach it. She reached out, and the second her fingers touched it, she promptly passed out. She awoke several hours later, being watched over in what counted as the Haven's sick bay. Aside from a small cut on the back of her head where she had landed on something, she had come out unscathed. No one knew what the reaction caused within her, and others had since investigated the meteor with no adverse consequences. She went back to her life and thought little of it, until she started to hear things. Something in her head sounded nothing like her trying to start a conversation. She tried her best to ignore it, thinking maybe she was just paranoid. That was until she next went into combat, a rarity but necessary due to the state of her haven. It warned her of danger, warded off a sectoid that attempted to psionically attack her, and even allowed her to somewhat retaliate. Afterwards, she was shunned even more than before, her fellow man fearing what they didn't understand. Now, finally listening, she learned that the voice in her head was another alien, something even the Elders hadn't encountered. It needed a host to survive, and she was the first organic it encountered on the planet and simply joined with her. Although parasitic in nature, it insisted it wasn't malevolent, and it wanted to preserve her at all costs. With no choice in the matter, she wanders the resistance, hoping to find a way to cure her condition.
Only a child when the invasion came. The day that changed Imy's life forever came much later. In 2028, sometime before her 20th birthday, Imy and her friends Nicole and Julia were on vacation. They had all been accepted into a prestigious Advent-sponsored university and were looking to celebrate. Amidst mounting stress in her family life, Imy was eager to get out and see the world. Nicole, an inspiring anthropologist, had come across a highly rated trip through a distant mountain valley. Having grown up in cities, the three young women were hungry for a true taste of the natural world. The trip offered a full cultural immersion, including tours of historical sites within a cultural preservation area Advent had created. Imy, herself greatly interested in art and painting, easily shared in her friends' enthusiasm. For the first week, the trip had been somewhat disappointing. Most of their time was spent in the nearby city of Bucharest, in museums. Against the promise of a stunning mountain vista, being cooped up in a hotel room was stifling. Imy pleaded with her two friends to stick it through, eager to see what she had came for. And that's where everything started to go wrong. Imy, Nicole, and Julia, along with 20 other tourists, boarded a bus that would take them deep into the wilderness, to that beautiful valley she was promised. Imy later awoke as the sun was beginning to set. All around her were crushed and bloody bodies. The bus lay on its side, having fallen off the road on the cliff high above. Everyone inside had been thrown about, and one of her legs were broken. A couple painful hours of fading in and out of consciousness followed, broken by an ear-piercing scream in the rapidly darkening dawn. Julia. Scrambling, the young artist crawled away from the wreck, only to find her friend dead. Pieces of her were missing, eaten by wild animals, presumably. And something was rummaging around in the bus behind her. Seized by panic, the young woman managed to crawl away. For several days, she managed to survive. Imy found help on the road a few miles from the wreckage. Finding inspiration in her tale of survival, a fresh creative spark burned. From her hospital bed, Imy produced some of the best works in her life, reinventing her black ink surrealism. But slowly, she began to change. A typically timid and mild-mannered woman, colleagues noted that she grew more irritable more often. Her temper would flare. Achieving some measure of fame with her artwork, it was inevitable that the young artist would receive an invitation to a prestigious art gallery. Perhaps it was stress that was causing all these changes in her personality, and there, her changed nature would doom her. The wrong things were said to the wrong people, people with influence and spite in their hearts. Very quickly, Amy discovered the truth of Advent's law and order from the other side. Creativity, she realized, could not thrive or breathe so easily beneath Advent's iron fist, which, in time, led her to us.